tonight, Reese and I are going to tag team, you know, what that means for you all who know Reese and I and have heard us both, you know, teach. You know that if I'm going first and then Reese is going second, you know that you're definitely getting the better preacher teacher after me. So that is really good news for you. I am tonight is so here's how Bible study is going to go, okay? And we're just trying to figure it out a little bit. But the idea is that Tuesday night would be a deeper journey into some of what we began to talk about on the Saturday prior, okay? So, this past Saturday we had our vision party, okay? Don't worry, I am not going to go all over all that same stuff again. Woo! I'm tired.
Oh, man.
I wore myself out on Saturday. So anyway, so how would that look tonight then? Well, tonight, one, we want to create space on the following Tuesday, always just sort of engage whatever was there on Saturday. It's like, do you have questions, thoughts, things you want to share? We're always going to create space for that. But we want to go deeper. We don't just want to create like a Q&A. We want to go deeper. So tonight, we're going to go deeper into the topic and sort of the theme of vision. Where does the vision party come from, right? So the idea being that we launched a vision for 2015 on Saturday. Where does the vision come from? How do you communicate vision? How do you make sure that that which you have communicated sort of actually plays itself out over the course of time? So many dreams and visions that I hear people talk to me about all the time die the moment that they come out of someone's mouth. Because they have no idea how to actually take what is in their heart, in their head, what God may have deposited in them, actually walk that thing all the way out so that what they are dreaming and envisioning becomes real. And so that's where we're going to go tonight. And we are going to do it on, you know, talk about vision. There's the vision for 2015, year of yes. But On-Ramps itself is a vision. I mean, On-Ramps started somewhere. It started when there wasn't anything. When there was no On-Ramps, it was a vision that God had given Reese and I that then we had to sort of walk out until it is what it is today, and it's still becoming. Because On-Ramps' vision, as we announced on Saturday and been talking about, isn't fulfilled yet. It's still a vision that we're carrying in our hearts and we're carrying together that is still sort of being manifested. Does that make sense? So, how do we make sure that that doesn't just stay on some fancy PowerPoint, but actually that vision happens? That the story and the narrative and the future of Fresno Light changes because this vision has become reality. That is where some would say it's where the rubber meets the road. That is where I would argue is the difference between, you know, well, I'll just say this. There's a very large graveyard for dreams and visions. But that's not where dreams and visions are destined to go. It's not where they're supposed to go. They're supposed to live. And so how do we get there? So I'm not going to share much about On-Ramp's story tonight. We're going to share actually and lean into some of your stories, some of your dreams, some of your visions. And we're going to benefit from one particular vision dream of a brother of ours in Atlanta who carried a vision all the way forward, and it's a wonderful, wonderful story. And you're going to get a chance to listen to it tonight. And he talks a little bit about what he's learned about vision over the years. So you're going to have an incredible night. Okay? So let me just quickly, Priscilla, can we get you anything? You all right? Okay. Let me just quickly get you past where we were on Saturday. And I want to take you to... Do you like these things? These prezzies?
So cute.
Are they worth doing, or are they just they make you dizzy?
No, they're cool.
You like them?
They make you dizzy.
Okay, so you've done lots of prezzies? Yeah? That's awesome. So So here's just a couple quick things. I want to make sure. Does anyone have any questions about On-Ramp's mission or vision at all? Anything you want to ask? Are we good on all that stuff? Pretty good? Yeah? Okay, I'm moving forward. All right?
Cool.
Stop me. Any questions about sort of our worship gathering rhythm? This is a brand new document. The rhythm idea is not new to On-Ramps. It's just that we're using some different words. It's going to give us a lot more clarity on our Saturdays. But I just want to make sure you're good on that. And you'll figure it out over time too. But do you have anything you want to ask me? Anything burning about that? Good? Yeah? Okay. And then I wanted to ask you, what was the other thing I was going to ask you about? Nothing about that. Okay, so that's everything from Saturday. Go ahead, Josh. What you got?
I wanted to ask, as far as like the impact,
Yeah, impact groups. Yeah,
Or-
these guys.
Or the impact gathering, which.
impact gathering.
Impact gathering. Yeah, got it.
Okay. So,
Third Saturdays.
right, so they continue to be like picking up trash and different things, activities, or?
Yes, they will always, well, so here's how we talk about it. There's a planning team that puts these things together, puts every Saturday together. And impact gatherings, we sort of say, look, one, they have to have an impact. Okay, but upon whom, right? So we say, look, we lean into our mission. Our mission is sort of two parts. A healing community, so that's this right here. Okay, that is a family, right? It's a family of God. So a healing community, healing its community. Okay, that's the little neighborhood. So when we talk about impact gathering, we say, look, our impact gathering either needs to impact this healing community or it needs to impact the community we're trying to heal. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, what could that be? Well, there are a million things that could do either of those things. Okay? Yeah. Anything else you want to say, or does that clarify?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, so is there things or visions for like different ways that we would impact this year?
Good question. So a couple of things. I mean, we're still working on some stuff at Dickey Park. We will again do another round of tree planting on Divisadero. But if there's anything that you know of that you would like to do, that you would like us to do together, man, just feed that to Reese or myself, or Mama's on the team, or Tish is on the team, Kendra.
Michael Carline.
So Michael Carline, just
Eric
tell
Foss.
us, tell any of us, Eric Foss, tell any of us, and we'll incorporate it.
Cool.
Okay? So if you have any ideas, any thoughts, anything that's going on, either in the community that you'd like us to be engaged in, or something here within our community. Okay? Good. Any other questions? Good? Okay? All right. What? Good? Okay, next thing is this. My last thing is I want to, we talked about this here, not that, that's the brain. Okay, leadership team stuff. Okay, so I don't really want to get too deep into this tonight, but I just want to say, again, Vince is the leadership team chair. Okay, so these are priorities that we came up with together. I can make that a little bigger for you. These are priorities that we came up with as a leadership team. So you saw who's on that team on Saturday. Okay? It's a wide variety of people. And that team just a month ago came up with these priorities for 2015. All right? Again, you have to think brain. You have to think the brain has decided that there are things that we just need to pay attention to. To you, they may not feel all that important or like, oh, I wasn't really thinking about that. Don't worry about it. The leadership team just feels like, man, if we don't do these things for a living organism, right, then we're going to feel that over the long term. It's sort of like in your early years, I'm learning this about health. In your early years, you know, if you just grow up eating nothing but like high cholesterol, high fat food, right, high sugar foods, you know what? For the first 18 years of your life, for the most part, it's not going to have a huge effect on you. I mean, you could develop diabetes, and there are things that could happen, but many kids do that. But boy, you keep doing that over time, right? You start feeling the effects of that like in your 20s and your 30s. You're like, man, those first 18 years of my life, like, I'm feeling them now. You know what I mean? So it's sort of like that's this kind of stuff. It's like we need to make sure our diet is good, because as we continue to sort of grow and mature, if we don't give attention to these things, which may not feel all that like hugely important to you right now, we just feel like as a leadership team, if we don't do that, we're going to feel that over the long haul.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Is that a good analogy?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Okay, any questions about this stuff? I mean, it's really basic, broad, but feel free to ask questions. Basically, you can see that we feel like we need deeper relationships with God and each other this year. We're going to do that by increasing sort of prayer and worship, continuing on the whole life giving front in a lot of different ways. We need to increase our presence in the community. Okay, so Pastor Timothy's going to lead us in regular night walks, which I'm super excited about. As concerning the youth, I feel like that's a huge place we need to invest. We need them more involved in just the life of the church, and the leadership team is talking about the possibility of everyone on the leadership team mentoring one young person. And then we just feel like we need to do some more leadership development. So just those are the broad strokes, okay? Any questions? Good? What's that?
Good idea.
Thanks. Good. Good job, Vince. All right, any other questions? We're good? Awesome. So tonight, so there it is, right? So the vision party Saturday, the question now is where do visions come from? How do you communicate a vision? What do we need to know about vision? What are some of your dreams and visions? And we're going to press into that the rest of the evening. So Reese is going to take us the rest of the way. Okay?
I'll put the video up for you.
Okay, 2 things before that video starts. Well, 3 things. 1 thing. 1 thing. With sub parts. So, I do want to ask you all, like he said, On-Ramp started with a vision. And it's definitely something that we kind of had in our hearts, like stirring up over years. We're just like, what do we do with this? It took somebody on the outside, actually, to tell us the time is now. So we have a spiritual mentor in our lives. I'm so excited you guys get to meet him at the end of this month. But anyway, Elder Claybon and his sister Tina, they are a dynamic duo. We were hanging out and conversation stopped, and he said, the time is now. And because it was already in our spirit, we knew exactly what he meant and exactly what he was talking about. So a lot of times the vision that you have in your heart, somebody else close to you will be able to look at you and say, it's time. It's time. It's time. And they won't have to explain anything else. You won't have to, what are you talking about? You already know. Your spirit connected with their spirit, you already know what they're talking about. And it's kind of like this release to go for it. This release to dive in head first. Just go for it, and no more tippy-toeing and like, oh, let me see how cold the water is, get my feet wet. They will say, Lisa, it's time. And you know it's time to just jump right in. So that's really cool. That's one of the cool things about being in community with each other and not living on this isolated island where, oh, I've got all these hopes and dreams and oh, wow. It's time, Teresa. And you already know what I'm talking about. Right? So that's one thing. And I do want us to spend some time before we watch this video. I want us to spend some time sharing with each other. Get in twosies, get in threesies. What are some of those dreams, those visions, those things that keep you up at night? There are things that you are burdened about, and you actually have the solution to that. You have the answer to that. What are some of those things? So I want us to talk about those. Before we talk about those, though, there's a song that I like by an old group called the Clark Sisters, an old gospel group. Anyway, on a particular part of this song, the leader starts ad-libbing, and she's saying, you got to see it before you see it, or you never will see it. And I'm like, what in the world? And she keeps saying it, you got to see it before you see it, or you never will see it. And I'm like, oh, that speaks of vision. You have to see it before you see it, or you never will see it. It sounds confusing on the surface, but in your heart, you know what that means. You have to see it before you see it, or you never will see it. You've got to place yourself there before you even get there, or you will never get there. You have to know that here's a map, here's Disneyland, we're in Fresno now, Disneyland is our destination. That's where we're going. You have to see yourself, what, I-5? I don't know. I don't drive, I'm the passenger. But you have to see yourself on that road. You've got to see yourself driving down that road. You've got to see yourself hanging out with Mickey and Minnie, or you'll never hang out with Mickey and Minnie. You'll never get there, right? So that's one thing about vision. Another thing about vision, Dr. Randy White said this, and it just, he said, sometimes you have to close your eyes to see your vision. Because you can get so distracted and discouraged by what we see in the natural, and all of the, oh, you can't, you shouldn't, you're too young, you're not educated enough, you're not this, you're not that. We get so blinded by that. We get so distracted by that, that sometimes we just have to close our eyes in order to see the vision. Right? There are some people in this room who, like, you never would have graduated from high school. You never would have started college. You never would be married. You never would whatever had you kept your eyes open because of all the distractions and all the discouragement that was going on around you. So sometimes you've got to close your eyes in order to see the vision. So we're going to take a look at this video. This guy, Bob Lupton, if you have the book, Theirs is the Kingdom. I got it. So this is Bob's story. Bob Lupton wrote the book, Theirs is the Kingdom, and here's his story. And then we'll have some good time of debrief after we watch this story. You want me to push play?
If you're ready.
Yeah, let me push play because I want us to have some time to to share
There you go.
in twosies or threesies, just some vision stuff. And it could, I mean, here's the thing about vision. There's no limits to it. There's literally no limits to it. Only you can say, no, man, no. What are those things that keep you up at night? What are those secret hopes and dreams that you have that you're just like, yeah, gotta do it. I don't know how. And that's the cool thing about vision is you don't have to know how just yet. All you have to do is commit to being a part of it. Commit to going for it. And then God will give you steps. But just talk amongst yourselves, twosies, threesies. You can mix up if you want to, if you already know the person you're sitting next to. But just talk to each other about dreams, about your visions. Ready, go. All right, we're going to dive into this video. I want us to have some time afterwards to debrief and for you all to continue your conversations. So we'll, yes, great video. Take notes. We'll have some talking points after. You ready to turn those lights on for me?
Yeah.
Go for it.
As a veteran of county development, author and speaker, Dr. Lupton has worked in the Atlanta, Georgia area as founder and president
You can turn that one off too,
of
sweetie.
Schools, helping the West neighborhood become healthy and self-sustainable.
No, don't fall asleep.
Listen carefully as Dr. Lupton chronicles the vision casting of the Glen Castle community in the city of Atlanta, Georgia.
In 1986, I had the privilege of being a visionary in a project that changed a lot of people's lives. It was the conversion of an old Civil War era prison called Glen Castle. I've had the opportunity to share this story with leaders and audiences all over the country, and I'm honored to be able to share it with you.
Audio okay?
In Atlanta, if you come into the heart of town from Interstate 20, the skyline looms in front of you. Right on a hill, very visible, is a building that for years folks drove by and wondered, what is that place? Actually, it's known as the Atlanta Stockade. Back after the Civil War, if you were so unfortunate as to be arrested and be poor, you were sent to the Atlanta Stockade to work off your sentence on the chain gangs. It was a major source of chain gangs for our city. A very dark history. For years they housed men, women, and children as young as 10 years of age in unsegregated barred wards. And when you realize that the syphilis rate among inmates was some years as high as 90%, you begin to get an idea of the gross inhumanity that took place in the old Atlanta stockade. There were always rumors of family members being sentenced there, never to be heard from again. Unsubstantiated rumors. I was able to check the records clear back to the beginning, and there was only one death ever recorded in that prison. That was a fellow with tuberculosis. But years after they closed the prison down, and in the late 50s, when the interstate highway was being cut across the prison property, the bulldozer operators kept turning up human skeletal remains. No idea who they were or how they got there. Some 50 bodies in that one excavation. The rumors proved to be true. Many deaths unrecorded. Finally, the city decided to rid the stigma of this place from the new Atlanta and decided to tear it down. Empty it, close it down, and tear it down. And they did. In the 1920s, they did empty it, but when the demolition bids came in, it was just too expensive to tear it down. It had been built out of what was then a brand new technology called steel reinforced poured concrete. And the theory was that this stuff, over the passing of time, would be harder and harder, which made it the perfect material for a prison, increasingly impregnable. And so they built it out of this new technology. They just didn't know what the tolerances were at that point. And so the walls are 4 feet thick, and the roof, made out of concrete, is 18 inches thick of poured concrete. It was just too expensive to tear down. And so the city abandoned it, and for most of the 1900s, there it sat in the midst of our community, a blight on the community, a place where drug distribution took place, and demon worship, and all kinds of other negative activities in that old prison. I got a call one day from a priest in our community by the name of Reddy Scott. Reddy had a call to work with poor people. A rich kid called to the city to work with poor people, and he didn't know what he was doing. And he called me and he said, "Hey Bob, would you meet with me?" He said, "I got this amazing idea." And so we went up onto the old stockade property, and there was a old blacksmith shop up there. And he said, "We could turn this into a mechanic shop for young men in the community, teach them mechanics." And I said, "Do you know anything about mechanics?" He said, "Well, no, he didn't know anything about mechanics." But it was a good idea. And then we looked at that great big monstrous prison sitting on a hill. And he said, "You know what?" He said, "That would be a great place as a homeless shelter." And I thought that was about the worst idea I'd ever heard. Housing our most vulnerable citizens in an old prison just didn't seem very hospitable to me. And he said, "Oh no," he said, "no," he said, "architects can do amazing things." And so together we invited a group of architects. One of those architects, the fellow whose picture is here, he came out to take a quick look and then invited 6 other of his architect friends. And so we climbed up over the rubble and into this dark, cavernous prison, and these architects were amazed. They literally began to salivate. I don't know if you've ever known an architect or not, but this is a strange breed of people. They actually see things that don't exist. And we were walking through this dark prison, and And all of a sudden, these guys are oohing and awing and saying, oh, this could be magnificent. They were seeing things that I didn't see. I could see the ugliness. They saw texture and color and light, and I had found a copy of the old original blueprints from the prison, and I pulled out those blueprints and I handed them to these architects. I said, would this be of any value? And it was like I was handing them the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was like sacred parchment. And of course, by this time, they're all brown with age, and they roll out those 100-and-some-year-old plans and trace those lines, and they said, they said, this could be amazing. This could be magnificent, this place. And about 2 hours into the discussion, they said, what kind of a budget are we working with here? And I said, well, you know, money really isn't the issue. But I said, if you want to know, I said, we've got in excess of $3,000 in the bank. And their reaction was pretty much like your reaction. They said, yeah, we're probably talking $3 million here, not 3,000. I said, you know, if you guys would commit your God-given talents to this project, I'll bet we've raised a good $300,000 right here, today, right here. And they said, we'll get back to you on that. Well, it was over the next couple, 3 weeks that I learned a very significant distinction. The difference between the chaff of bright ideas that just sort of gets whisked away by Monday morning's busyness, and the kernel of vision that when it drops down into the soil of the human spirit, it takes on a life of its own, and it heats up, and it pushes its way up through to the conscious attention of the bearer, and they can't get away from it. The Spirit of God dropped a kernel of vision into the soil of 7 architects, and they couldn't get away. And we reconvened 2 weeks later, and they said, we're going to take on this project for you, pro bono. They said, we have to have, there's one condition that we have to have. They said, you can't draw enough lines to redo this old prison because nothing is standard, nothing would fit on their CAD machines, everything has to be hand-drawn. They said, we've got to have a very close working relationship with the general contractor, hand in hand. They said, who is your general contractor? I said, well, who do you know? Well, they knew them all. They'd worked with these guys that had built the skyline of Atlanta. And I said, why don't you share your vision with them? And so they had a meeting out at the old stockade. They built a ramp and cleared out rubble and put Coleman lanterns. They swept out one of the halls that went down into the old warden's office. And they invited the 12 general contractors that had built the skyline of Atlanta to breakfast at the old stockade in the warden's office. And none of those guys wanted to miss it because they'd all seen that building from the expressway. They'd really never been there. And in the warden's office, these architects had tables spread with linen and china and a gourmet breakfast prepared. And over in the corner, with Coleman lanterns on each side, they had drawn a great big full-color rendering, colored picture of what the old stockade could become. And they invited these 12 general contractors in for breakfast in the wooden office and sold the vision to them. Now in the business world, there are competitors, and then there are general contractors. These guys are fierce competitors. They guard their secrets from each other. They know how to underbid each other. This is a dog-eat-dog world. And when 12 major competitors get together and lock arms and say, we're going to take on a project together, history is being made. When they left that breakfast, they had that project divided up 12 ways, and they said, we'll do all of the construction management on this. And they sent out letters to all of the subcontractors and suppliers that they work with every day. They sent and said, boy, do we have a vision for you. We need you to donate all that goes into demolition, reconstruction, windows, floors, cutting, coring, architectural design of the landscapes. And I mean, it just on and on. It was moving. The vision was coming alive before our eyes. And what we realized was we didn't really own the building then. And so we went to the real estate developers, the guys with the big pockets, the deep pockets, and we said, would you be willing to buy this building for us? And they said, sure, we'd be happy. This is a very exciting project. And they set to work, raising money among themselves to buy this building, about a little over $300,000 worth. And they started raising the money to buy the building. And so the vision is now starting to get off the ground. We've got buyers lined up. And with that money, we went down to the owners who had got it from the city and said, we're ready to buy it. We knew it was available. And they said, it's already been sold. A group from New York City bought it. Now, I'm a fairly up person, but that one took me down. There were lots of people that had bought into this vision. I was sure it was a vision of God. Could God be playing some sort of a bizarre trick? All these people were excited about this vision. The money was already raised for it, and now the vision was gone. And I had to start calling people, telling them that we're sorry, but somebody else has bought the building. It took me down. That was a very, very discouraging, depressing moment. And I couldn't understand it. I was very confused and very discouraged and very embarrassed. Got a call about 2 weeks later. They said the contract has fallen through. Are you still interested? Oh boy, were we interested.
Look at God.
We raced down and signed our signature on that contract and did the deal, and the vision was back on track. I'll loop around in the latter part of this little talk and tell you what I make of that death of a vision. But for now, it was going. Now we're a little ministry. We got a lot of friends now that are saying we want to be involved in this. We've got this old prison that we own, but we don't have any of the capacity to manage a project of that size. We have no talents inside of our staff that can do construction management. So we are ill-equipped to take on a vision of this magnitude. I get a call during this time from a fellow who I'd never met before. Introduced himself as Chris Humphreys. He said he'd like to meet with me, and I did. And he said, I think I'm supposed to be involved in this conversion, this whole building. I said, really? I said, well, what is it that you would like to do? He said, I think I'm supposed to run the project. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, I've had some construction experience. I said, well, that's interesting. I said, we actually don't have any money to hire a construction manager on this. He said, money's not the issue. He said, I'm supposed to do this. Who is this guy coming out of the blue? I do a little bit of phone call and then find out that Chris Humphreys is one of the most respected developers in town, who a few years earlier resigned from the presidency of one of the major companies, took an early retirement because his alcoholism had just kind of gotten the better of him. And he had kind of fallen off the wagon, but highly respected. What I did not know was that 2 weeks prior to his phone call, he had been in the boardroom of one of the downtown office buildings, and a fellow slipped him a note, a fellow developer. It said, there's a note that said, Chris, there's a project you ought to be involved in. It's that old stockade. He dropped it stuck in his pocket. Later that week, he was in another business meeting, and another banker slipped him a note and said, Chris, there's a project you ought to be involved in. It's that old stockade. Interesting. Stuck in his pocket. Later that week, he was at his Jewish foot doctor's office having an ingrown toenail clipped. And his Jewish foot doctor said to him, Chris, there's a project you ought to be involved in. It's that old stockade. And Chris, in his heart, said, I think God is trying to get a message through to me. Now, Chris hadn't been inside of church since he was about 12 years old, when he was a very devout young member of the Catholic Church up in New York City, and something went wrong. And Chris left that church never to go back. But he said he had this feeling that God was trying to get a message through to him, and the only place that he knew where people might be hearing from God is out at that old monastery outside the city, where the monks were. And maybe they're trustworthy. So he drove out there. It was a cold winter night, close to Christmas time. He drives out to the monastery, gonna have prayers with the monks. And he gets there, and he arrives too late. The monks had already gone to bed. And so he turned around and drove back into the city. Hadn't heard from God. And as he's coming in I-20, just rounding the curve where you can see the skyline of the city, unbeknownst to him, there are a group of people out in the darkness behind the old Atlanta stockade getting ready for a Christmas celebration. 200 or so people standing in the darkness, and when the choir starts singing, Joy to the world, the Lord is come, let earth receive her King, the lights on a massive Christmas tree way up on top of the Atlanta stockade blink on. And it's a breathtaking moment. Chris is driving by just as the lights come on in that Christmas tree. And he says, I think I hear you, God. And he calls me the next day. Here, one of the city's leading real estate developers said, I'm called of God to lead your project. We can get a lot of materials donated. We can get a lot of pro bono work done, but there's still a good bit of money to be raised. You can understand that. And I get another phone call from an old friend, a guy from Orlando, Florida, who is a longtime buddy, probably the best fundraiser I've ever met in my life. His name's Ralph Bierman. And he said, what are you into these days? And I said, let me tell you about a vision. And he said, I gotta be involved. And so Ralph helps us set up some promotional materials together. Start organizing some tours of the Atlanta stockade. He brings that fundraising savvy into the mix. What I'm discovering is visions take a whole lot more talent and energy than a visionary. They draw people in with the talents that are needed to fulfill the vision. Ralph says, you gotta start doing tours, and so I thought, there's a couple of sisters that I know. One is whose name is Florida Ellis, and her sister. This is old Atlanta blue blood. You call them silk stocking warrior type people. I invite Florida out for a tour because she's curious about the old stockade. Somewhere back in her family history, there has been some involvement there, and she and her sister have a vague memory of that. And so we're walking around the outside of the old stockade. There are vines growing up all over it, and her sister says, is that the cornerstone there? And so we pulled back some of the vines, and both of them stood there with their mouths open. And they said, that's great granddaddy's name on there. He was the mayor when the cornerstone of this prison was set. They said, we've got to be involved with you in financing the construction and rehab of this prison. It took probably 3 years from the conceptual stage to the actual opening stage. About a year of construction activity. And folks were coming in and out of that prison. We had 12 different construction companies. We had 14 different electrical companies, and on and on and on. Coordinating this was an overwhelming task. But the people who came around the vision had those kind of skills and abilities. And so for us, it made the process pretty easy. They had computers and they had connections, and they organized and ran what was a very complex construction process. The day finally came when the construction was done, and we had a big celebration. Linnell Harris came in. He wrote a song about this. It's a castle of hope. It's a bridge to a dream. It's uncommon love. It's an amazing song. And he came down and unveiled that and sang that at the celebration. And behind him was a backdrop of a transformed prison. And in the courtyard in front of that prison, several hundred people gathered. It was an Easter Sunday morning. We were celebrating the grand opening of what was now a new building called Glen Castle. It was on Glenwood Avenue. It sort of looked like a castle. And so the design folks, those creative people who do logos and layouts, they said Glen Castle would be a great, I'd like to live in Glen Castle. Who had had a hand in its construction were there for the celebration. When we opened the doors, there wasn't a penny of debt on the place. Everything had been paid for. That meant that the folks who would be moving in the next week could move into the most affordable apartments, fully furnished, in town. Because there was no debt to pay, there was no loan on the building. The lawyers had worked to get it removed from the tax rolls, so there was no property tax on it. And without tax and without debt service, you can structure those rents so low that even those who have been priced out of the housing market can afford to live there with utilities included. For some who had to face that awful choice of deciding whether to pay their rent or whether to buy groceries for the kids, they can do it both and have money left over as residents of Glen Castle. And so the crowd erupted with cheers, released balloons up into the sky. And it was a time of incredible rejoicing, both for residents who would be moving in and those who had participated in the transformation. It wasn't seen as an evangelism project. It was participating in the movement of God in history to transform a symbol of oppression and injustice into a symbol of compassion. And people from all over the place, from all different kinds of religious and non-religious backgrounds, were drawn into it. In that crowd that morning was Arnie Silverman and his brother, who had a major role in the construction. Jewish brothers. And when we sang Amazing Grace, those guys were mouthing the words along with Savior wretch like me. Now I don't know what kind of mental gymnastics they had to go through to get that square in their mind or in their thinking, but I do know this. They knew that they were caught up in the movement of God who changes history. And they had a role in it. And their hearts were warmed by it. Well, what did some little nuggets that I have gleaned from participating in a vision like this? Incidentally, that was now nearly 20 years ago. The building still looks like that. The building stays full. The building pays for itself. The rents are sufficient that we can have a chaplain, a community chaplain in residence there to meet the spiritual needs of folks.
Amen.
Programs that go on to support the residents there. A healthy, drug-free re-entry point back into stable community living. A vision authored of God that continues to be sustained. I found this out, that if it's a vision of God, it does not come from human origin. It's not somebody's bright idea. It's a blessing of God to His diverse human family. And that blessing is extended to not only homeless who became residents in Glen Castle, but to contractors who needed additional significance in their marketplace talents, of architects and engineers and fundraisers, saints and sinners, wealthy and poor. God calls folks around the vision from all sorts of places and across all sorts of lines that tend to segment society. A vision is like a balloon. You see a balloon that's it's kind of long and uninflated, and when it's just laying there, it looks sort of dark. And you don't really know what shape it is until you start blowing on it. And the more you blow, the shape takes place, and it comes out, and it may go in an S shape, or it may curl around like this. And what looks like a real dark color ends up being a bright green. You don't know what the end product looks like until it's inflated. A vision, it takes the diverse family of God to put their energy, their breath into the vision to fill it out. And when it's completed, it's not like we thought it would appear from the beginning. It's better, it's brighter, it's more creative. If you are a visionary, that is the one who has been blessed to be the voice of the vision, the spokesperson for the vision. If you are that visionary, your role is not to own the vision, but to support the vision with an open hand. It's like that balloon that's inflated that needs a place to rest, and when the wind of the Spirit starts to blow, the visionary keeps his or her hand under the vision to support it, but not to seize it and control it and take it in his or her direction. The visionary's role is to support the vision, not own the vision. You know what the death of the vision was about? Didn't know till later. When that vision died, it was a major corrective for me because I had taken full ownership and responsibility for that vision. I was going to take that vision in a direction, and I was responsible for it. And so God simply took it away. And it was, for a moment, for 2 weeks, it was gone. But when it came back, I knew who was to be in charge. It was a corrective of the ownership of the vision. This is God's vision. He can give it or take it. Your role is to tend it, to be a caretaker of it, to be a voice piece for it, but not the owner of it. The visionary's role is to be the guardian, to protect it from being subverted by influences that would take it in a different direction. When we were looking at this project and we didn't have a dime, and we said the chances are this is going to cost in excess of $3 million, and we just didn't know where in the world this would come from. Our little ministry that's going paycheck to paycheck wasn't capable of this. I get a phone call from the city of Atlanta, and they said, Congress has passed the McKinney Act, that was the Homelessness Act. And the first installment of government monies have come to Atlanta, and you're the only project that's on the radar screen. The total amount of this is $3 million. Are you interested? Whoa. It almost turned me into a charismatic. You know, I was teetering there for just a minute. Now Rennie, he was already there. He was a charismatic, so he was going. And so we said, the Lord has provided, and we went down to sign the papers and the documents and to get all this stuff lined up, and we started reading the fine print. And there were some clauses in there about separation of church and state. And you can't do religious things in here. And it's for homeless men. And we said, wait a second, the vision was families. But it's $3 million. Is God providing? For Rennie and me, it was a test of, are you going to be the guardian of God's vision, or are you going to be seduced by other influences that will change that vision?
Come on, that's good. Come on.
And we said, thanks, but no thanks. And we were back to square one. Back to square one. Then a very bright attorney came in and said, hey, there's this deal called tax credits. And this is his historic building. And you can apply for tax credits, and actually people will, companies, rich people, will buy those tax credits from you. You can do that. You don't need it as a nonprofit because you're not taxed. But you can sell those tax credits to other people who have tax problems, and you can make over $1 million just in tax credits. And we said, could be God's provision. Could be His provision. And so he said, let's go. And we started filling out all the forms to apply for tax credits. And when the word got out among the architects, general contractors, the companies that were coming around this, that some people stood to gain financially from this project, it changed the spirit of it immediately. It was, then I need to get my just dues out of this. And we realized how the spirit of that was changing, and we said, no, that isn't what God wants for this. And so we said, stop the process. So we're back to square one again. You know what our fundraising strategy ended up being? Rennie and I agreed that every morning we would get up and we would pray. And if God brought a person to our minds during the course of the day, that we would not rest until we shared the vision with that person. Period. That was a fundraising strategy. Somehow in the magnificence of God's movement among His diverse family, He already knew where the resources were.
Yeah.
He was going to bring those with those right resources around His vision
Yep.
to make it happen. A vision of God is bigger than our own capacity to deliver it. If we can see our way clear with our own ingenuity, with our own contacts, with our own resources, if we can see how we can pull a vision off, probably isn't of God. A vision of God is just way beyond human capacity. It takes something like the magic of the kingdom. It's a faith journey that God invites us into that we can't see down the road very far, and so we have to rely on the movement of the Spirit to do the arranging, the little miracles, the coincidences that have to find each other in order for this vision to take place. And when they do, we know that it wasn't our own initiative. It wasn't our own network and our own connection. Because these are people like Chris that came out of the blue, never knew a guy who God called to become a leader. If it's not bigger than our own capacity, chances are it may not be a vision of God. May be a great idea, and we should be about wonderful ideas. Those are good. But it's different from a vision authored of God. The visionary is probably not the same person who is equipped to run the vision. The visionary is probably the one that has energy and communication abilities and can be a contagious influence and share his or her excitement and show what God is doing, but probably doesn't have the full range of skills to manage it. Takes other abilities to do that. Takes other abilities to be a fundraiser. Takes other abilities to do construction, other abilities to manage real estate. Visionary is important, but not sufficient. It's a shared vision. that God wants his diverse family having a piece of, having a role in. He wants people that we wouldn't choose to have their signatures written into his plan in history. It's beyond our networks, our church, our denomination, our friends. A vision has an incubation period. We don't know what that is. It's like a seed. Some seeds lay dormant for a season, come alive in the spring. Other seeds lay dormant for years. A vision has a gestation period. And in the fullness of time, God begins to arrange the circumstances. You don't need to worry about forgetting a vision. You don't have to write it down when you wake up. Because when God authors it, you can't avoid it. It's in you. It takes over your life. In the fullness of time. A vision is born of God, and it's born, carried by God. God authored it. God has the responsibility for carrying it and seeing it through to its completion.
Yes.
Was it George Miller that said, God's work, God done in God's way, will never lack God's supply? It's true of a vision. God will see it to its completion, even when, and especially when, our capacities to deliver fall short. A vision is magnetic. It draws people. It's more than an exciting idea. It's something that touches people's spirit and draws them into becoming a part, the sense that they are participating in history. It's magnetic, and it draws people from all different sources and places. That's why it's usually bigger than a church. Church has too many boundaries. It draws people from all different kinds of denominations and faiths and non-faiths and secular as well as otherworldly, spiritually folks that may be different from us. God decides who should be involved. Of course, it will draw unsavory elements as well. Therein is the role of the visionary to be the guardian. And I would say finally that a vision is redemptive. Now I didn't see this as an evangelism project. I saw this as compassionate work that God kind of caught me up in. But I didn't see it as primarily evangelistic. When, after the project was completed, and the building looked like that, Chris and one of the real estate developers whose picture you saw, solid Christian guy that had been trying to evangelize Chris for years, been witnessing to him. Chris was never too much interested. Billy Mitchell is his name, and he described Chris as his favorite pagan. Chris was a wild guy. For years, maybe 30, Chris would go every year over to Pamplona, Spain, to run with the bulls. And he'd been gored and tossed up in the air and brought back in an ambulance, and he was just rejoicing in his wounds. He said that's a spiritual experience. This is a wild guy. Billy and Chris and I go out for dinner after the project. And Billy's saying, he said, I've done lots of projects in this city, but he says there's none that's been any more fulfilling than this one. He said, this one makes a difference. And Chris said, I'll tell you something else, Billy. He said, for years, I've been running from God. He said, for the first time in my life, I'm at home.
Wow.
The best way he could describe that somehow in the process, God had wooed him back to himself. And he said, I'm home. I had the honor of speaking at Chris's funeral. And 2 weeks before his funeral, Chris called me to his home and said, Bob, he said, there's something I want you to tell all my friends. He said, I want you to tell them that that project saved my life. He said, that project turned me to God. And he said, I want all my friends to know that it saved me. And the joy of telling hundreds of his friends the story of Glen Castle and the story of Chris's transformation. Wasn't an evangelism project, but in the movement of a redemptive God through history, he calls people from places that you and I wouldn't imagine, calls them to himself in ways and reveals himself in ways that our four spiritual laws wouldn't connect.
Come on.
But he calls them to himself through a history-changing vision. Should you be so blessed to be called of God to participate in his vision in history, you are of all people most blessed. And your life will never be the same. Amen.
Wow. So I'm like on the verge of tears right now, just like, thoughts, reactions, feelings. What's that?
When the new building was revealed, I couldn't help but think of like where I am about to do something new. Say I've already begun, do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness.
Come on.
It's like, oh,
Yes,
the
I
kingdom
see.
of God is already here.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Any other thoughts, feelings, reactions?
I like the part, I can't quote it like he quoted it, but when God gives the vision, then he will give the provision. And that just stood out to me.
Yeah. What else? Other thoughts? Brandy? Jeff? God is good. Yes, he is.
Like he was talking about, that the visionary is just supposed to support the vision.
Steward. Yeah.
How God so often does, how he orchestrates things.
Yeah. And that the vision does not rest solely on the visionary, but you need other talents and other people with other gifts to come alongside and play their part, play their role. Victoria, you're next to me.
How they were about to lose the church or
Lose the building,
the
uh-huh.
building, but then God and other people being in and saved it. God helped.
And what did he learn? What did Bob learn in that 2-week period? What did he learn in that process?
Their vision, like depending on God, or
To depend on God. That it's not his. It's not his responsibility. That it's God.
It's
God's vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God's vision.
Yeah.
Just listening to him and all that he was saying puts me in mind of what's happening like right now with myself. That when I first came to Fresno, I came across the 180 and we took the Fulton Van Ness exit, and that building right there jumped out and spoke to me. And every time I go by that building, I speak to that building,
Mhm.
and I thank the Lord, and what he said is actually what I be doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I said, what I be doing.
Yeah.
And that I'm calling in and thanking him for all the people that will participate in that.
Yeah.
And that I'm calling in all the money that will come from all the places, and that I'm thanking him for all the people and just everything that he's organizing. Because in and of myself, there isn't anything that, I mean, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
me.
yeah.
You know, but that's, you know, what he's saying is what we do. Every
Yeah.
time we go by there, we speak and we thank the Lord that he's bringing all of this together. How exactly, I don't know.
Mhm.
But I know that building belongs to us.
Mm.
You know, and I know that he has people already in mind.
Yeah. Yep.
And all the ideas for it and everything. And it's just seeing that, you know, and just, you know, for that building and the one that's diagonal from it. And it's gonna take money,
Mhm.
you know, but, I can see it. I can see it.
It'll take the right resources. What did he say they had in the bank? $3,000. That was a $3 million project, and it was done in 3 years. Started with 7. I'm all about numbers. Like, I believe numbers like mean something in the Bible. Started with 7 architects and 12 general contractors. That's all it took. Other thoughts? Wow.
I like what you said, there, it was very tempting to see like, oh, here's this offer, God must be providing in this way, but
Yes.
to like, I like how he outlined like, no, we have to like
Mm-hmm.
check it out,
Yep.
guard the vision.
Yep, yep. He says, as a steward of God's vision through you, don't be seduced by other things. Yeah, it probably would have worked out. Like, yeah, let's just go sign this paperwork and it's paid for. Oh, but wait, separation of churches. That's not, not at total peace about this, right? So, yeah, don't sell out. Don't be seduced by other things. Yeah. Other thoughts?
So the vision is a part of you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And that you don't even have to think about it. You
Yeah.
can write it down.
Can't avoid it. It takes over you. You will lay awake at night thinking about it and praying about it. Every time you pass by, praying. Yeah. Rachel.
When he said that when a vision is not in your capacity, that's usually when it's from God, because if it's in your own
Yes.
means, then it's just something that you can do.
Yep. Yep. Bigger than our own capacity to deliver it. Absolutely.
I like when he said when God drops the seed into your heart or into your spirit, then it may lie there.
Yeah.
It could take root any moment,
Yep.
but there's a gestation period
Yeah. Yeah.
in order for it to be birthed.
Yeah. Yeah. So don't despise small beginnings. Don't think that nothing is happening when it's dark. Don't think that nothing is happening. Like, something's happening. You can't tell what's happening, but there's a lot of work that goes on underground when that seed is planted. Absolutely. So, any other thoughts? Brandy, Tish?
I was just sharing this with Brother Timothy. Like, I don't know, like when you see someone else's passion about their vision, like you start believing in that as well. Because I was saying to him when he was out of town and I would pass by, I was doing the exact same thing. He was like, it was just like a second nature thing. I just was like, oh, when we pass by here, we have to pray and believe God, you know? So I was like, when you see other people and how their faith works, you start to stretch out that faith as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love how, just a simple part where he stated, the all walks of life. Everybody that came together, whether they were Christian or whether they were not. And I don't know, just the most amazing part is at the end, this guy that wasn't even like with God, like turned
Yeah.
and invited him into his heart and into his life.
Yeah.
You know, and I think out of everything, I seen that as, that was the beauty of the story right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That something like this can bring so many people together and it not be just outright, okay, this is a Christian project.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it just, I love how God just brings people together.
Yeah.
You know, and for just a little reason, this guy wanted to do something, had a little thought, and look what came out of it. I mean, like, a vision can start off just like, you know what, I want this is gonna happen, and God just, you know what, okay, let's do this. And it was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great story. So if you get a chance on your downtime, because I'm sure you have downtime. But yeah, just look up Bob Lupton, the great things that his ministry is doing in the Atlanta area. His book, by the way, Theirs is the Kingdom, was a book that Phil and I would lay in bed and read little vignettes every night when we lived on Fremont, Maple and Knees. And it was that book that broke us and said, you're moving to Lowell. And here's why. So 8 years ago when we moved into Lowell, things that we didn't know were going to come out of it, came out of it. The fruit was just so like, I'm not going to start crying though. But, because a vision will bring you to tears. No. Anything else? Anything else? Okay. So, so Pastor Timothy has the ability to drive by something that he sees and that he knows that God has given him, right? He knows that God, he can stretch out, he can see it, he can stretch his hands towards it and say, yes, that's it, and this is what it's going to be used for. Some of us may not be able to do that because there is no physical structure for it, okay? So I know Lupton said, you know, a vision is something that you don't have to write down. You can't avoid it. It keeps you up at night. It takes over you. And I totally agree with that. At the same time, I am the type of person where I need to write it down. Because again, things can be distracting and discouraging and and it could be painful, and you need to go back to that piece of paper, or you need to go back to that website, or you need to go back to that book that changed your life and say, oh, okay, okay. Remind yourself what it's really about. So I gave you all, Vince gave you all 2 little circles. On one of the circles, I want you to just write briefly. If you just have one word for it, if you have a full-on name for it, just write down what your vision is. To open up a transitional home for teens who are coming out of the foster care system. I don't know. Whatever that is. Write that vision down on one of those pieces of paper. On the other piece of paper, he talks about shared vision. You are just the visionary. You cannot do it alone. So on the other piece of paper, I just want you to write down maybe just a few names that come to mind of people who would stand and agree with you on this vision. People that God has shown you they are going to be a part of this vision. Or God has shown you need them praying for you as it pertains to this vision. So on the one piece of paper, the vision. On the other part, the people with the vision. And remember, you are just a guardian of this vision. You are just stewarding it. You are just tending it. It's God's. He's giving it to you to steward it. So what is that vision? And then who are the people connected to that vision?